Good morning and welcome to Sunday Coffee. Joining again, my co-host, the future governor of New York, TK Eppley. On this episode, we're going to have round two of why should we help people and why should we celebrate their successes. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Good morning, TK.
Good morning, fine sir.
What's going on?
You said I was going to be the next governor of New York. Are you transplanting me?
Oh, did I say New York this time? Maybe I just have New York on my mind. I thought you mentioned that you should be governor of like all of the states. I mean,
that's called president.
Yeah,
that's called president, by the way.
Well, yeah. I mean, eventually.
Actually, the governor's race in Virginia is very tight right now.
Is it?
Yeah. A guy who's a former, for everybody out there, you're not allowed to have consecutive terms as the governor in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's one of the anomalies of being one of the founding colonies is that the Constitution of Virginia doesn't allow for consecutive terms. I used to think it was a really good thing. But after we've had the current governor, if you can't get reelected, it frees you to do whatever you want, and sometimes that's not so good.
Right.
And so the Republican that's running against the former governor who's now running again, Terry McAuliffe, he's actually now Terry McAuliffe has helped himself out with some really galactically ignorant statements, and helped Youngkin is the name of the guy that's running against him, but. It's interesting to see where you've got a hedge fund millionaire running against another millionaire, and that millionaire is the typical, 2021 politics that we play. My color of money is better than your color of money, but I think it's probably a dead heat right now, which is in Virginia. It surprises me, right? I mean, because realistically, whatever Northern Virginia decides in Loudoun, Fairfax, and a couple of other counties up there, kind of is how the state goes, just because of the number of people up there. And the rest of the state, other than Richmond and Virginia Beach, is just not that populous.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, on Wednesday, Jason and I started talking about why should you help people, and because I know you've spent a large part of your 250 years on this planet of helping people. But really, what's the reason why we should try to help people?
Do we want to talk about the reasons why, or do we want to talk about the reasons why you wouldn't? Right? Because there's, in my mind, to me, there's no reason why you would not help somebody. And the thing is, if you have the opportunity to help somebody and to say, hey, what's your journey and how can I accelerate your journey? Why wouldn't you do that? Right? To me, it's almost like, there's no reason why I wouldn't do that. And I mean, like I said, we've known each other for more than a minute, and I can't imagine not wanting to help somebody be better tomorrow than they were yesterday. Right?
I can't either. And I think that's the real question. But I see so many people choose to not help when they could, and I also see so many people be, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but they won't celebrate the other person's success because they got it over them.
Well, I think a lot of it's envy, right, rather than jealousy. And here's the thing: you can be all of that, and you can still help somebody, right? And you can be angry about things, and you can still help somebody, right? And my personal belief is that the more that I'm helping other people, the better I am, right? The more whole I am intrinsically, right? And I don't do it because of that, but for all of us, you, me, and all the folks we tend to hang out together with that we've known for a while now, and we're doing things, is that we don't even think about it. Like if somebody needs something, you help them, right? And it's to the best of your ability, right? Now, there are people that, take advantage of that. And after a while, you have to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, it's like the old joke, we name streets after you. They're called one way.
Yep.
Right. And kind of the concept of giving and being helpful to other folks is you want to see them be helpful to other folks. I don't necessarily need it returned to me, but you have to return it to somebody.
Yeah,
right. And I don't do it with the expectation of being returned to me. I do it with the expectation of, hey, you're going to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday, and I want you to go help somebody to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday.
Yeah. I think there are absolutely times where I've chosen not to help someone, mainly because I've learned that they won't pay it forward.
Right.
But that was after, I don't know, however many attempts. All right. But once I realized that this person's never going to pay it forward, they're nothing but a taker. They're not a giver as well. And probably the reason why I don't help them is I no longer associate with them. Once I realize that's who they are, then they get
you're off the list.
Yeah, they just get cut out. So
it was like the old cartoon Sylvester the Cat where he would cross birds off his list of things he was getting. I
can really appreciate that kind of thing.
What's that?
I can really appreciate that kind of thing of having a list.
Oh no, you won't do anybody. But no, it's one of those things that, and you've heard me say this for years. Like there's net takers and there's net givers. I don't do net takers, right? And it's not any other reason than it just bums me out, right? To watch somebody be selfish like that.
It really does. I've also found that people that are net takers are also the energy vampires, right? They just suck all of the energy out.
Yep. No, I'm totally down with that.
And this is one of the things that I really preach to a lot of people is I'm like, we're all going to have our ups and down days. It's going to happen. So when you realize when you're in a down day, who are the people that when you immediately see them raises the energy? Those are the people you need to go talk to when you're having a down day.
You need to lean in.
Yep.
Right. That's the people, it's funny because especially at work, right? Because, we work in a high energy place and the consequences of making a mistake are actionable. You can see them in action. Right. And so when you have, in my mind, where you're leading up to high stress events, you've got deliverables, you have everything else, certain people go within themselves and it becomes difficult to work with them. But I think as a leader, one of the ways that you can give in those situations is to be the guy that keeps some level of, some measure of levity or joviality about everything, to say, hey, it's all right. Like, I get it. Everybody's focused. We're all amped up a little bit, but you know what? We're going to do it, and we're going to do it well. Right? And creating that culture of success, right? And I think even I'll tell you the hardest thing, and I've talked about this before, is like when you're going through a really hard period in your life, when things aren't going well for you personally, is how can you still give? Right? And I'll be plain honest, like I can give, and I've gotten cranky and bitchy and everything else at people because, and it's probably wrong-headed, but I'm still gonna, internally, where it's like, it's like you go back to the thing. It was like, I have given so much to other people, and this is when you're at your worst as a giver. This is when you're at your worst. I've given so much to other people, and now that I need something, there's nobody there for me. Right. And I think even people you love, even people that say they love you and everything like that, if there's an expectation of return, that's when you're going to go spiral down.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with
That's
that.
the hard part about giving is that you've got to give with no expectation of getting it back. And I think for most of my adult life, I never had an expectation until I went through a tough time. And then it wasn't really an expectation as much as like, hey, don't tell me you care about me. Don't tell me you love me. Don't tell me anything else if you're not willing to help and actively be a participant, right? And standing on the sidelines going, hey, you're in the middle of the road, look out for traffic, isn't help, right? And I think that becomes the hard part when you try to be a better person. You try to, you imagine your best self, right? And some days when you're not your best self, that's when those things creep in.
Absolutely. And this is a big thing where people, I think, they confuse a little bit of when someone's in giver versus taker, because it appears that these people are giving. And a lot of times it's going to be a play on this particular phrase, which is when they do when you do something for them and they say, and of course the person says thank you, and they go, hey, I'm sure if you were in my position, you would do the same for me, which is basically now putting that thing back in their mind. And so it's, that they still have that power. And
right.
And that means that tells that person is only giving really because he wants a future receipt.
I think the hard part with giving sometimes is when people don't, like, you can overlay your intent and how you would behave onto somebody else, right? So if I would behave a certain way in a situation, in a giving situation, and somebody doesn't do that, for me, that was a big struggle. It's like, well, why wouldn't you do that? Right? To me, to me saying, hey, I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna defend you, I'm gonna do whatever it is that it takes to, in my mind, be a giving person. If somebody tells you, they care about you, whatever level it is, friend to ultimate love, and they don't act the way you would act, that becomes hard sometimes, right? If you're riding high and everything like that, it's fine. But if you're down and you're like, wait a second, I would never do that, right? I would behave a completely different way than you behave. That's when it becomes hard to be gracious, right? Because you're like, there's no effing way on earth I would ever do that. In fact, I would do the exact opposite, right? And then she was like, well, I didn't know, I didn't see, it doesn't matter, all of those things. If you question somebody on it, and they're like, well, why? Why is it important to you? Well, because it was about me, right? And those crazy things. But that's the hard thing, when you say you want to be a giver and you want to try to help make people better tomorrow than they were yesterday, that's the hard part, right? The hard part is when you're down and you need somebody and you start looking around and who is there or who's not, right? And I think, and I don't, know at what period of time because of the 175 years I've been on the planet, but you're going to go through ups and downs, right? And how people react to you when you're down. There's a great meme out there that says, success will give you the woman you want. Struggle will give you the woman you need. Right? And that's just in people, right? I mean, when you're successful and everything's going great, you've got a whole host of friends around you and people and folks that say, hey, I want to be with that person because they appear to be successful and everything. What happens when it's the other way around? Yeah.
Well, speaking of memes, and I know you're not a Star Wars fan, but it reminded me of this one where it says great leaders lift people up, and it's a picture of Darth Vader doing a chokehold on someone.
Yeah. That is all you, dude. That is so very much you. That's funny.
But I think you're absolutely right when you're. It's hard to be gracious when you're down, but I think that's an easy, or that is an easy way. It's the quickest way of getting back into that mentality of being, the net giver. Because regardless, even when you're down, you're going to try to be able to give.
Right.
So that's why I started focusing on the aspects of my energy, because just being around someone who's a high energy person, and that helps me very quickly get back into that frame of mind of, hey, you got where you are because you're a giver, and you're going to get back to where you need to be because you're a giver. And that's that jolt. Also, I think we've talked about, like, why I'll pour that 1 ounce of the really good whiskey if it was a really bad day or a really good day. It's to keep me in that framework that when I've had that bad day, I know this will pass. And at the end of that ounce, no matter if it was a great day or a bad day, I forget about it. Like, basically, it's now you gotta move on. Now you're only as good as what you do next. Right.
I'm a big believer that the energy thing to me is huge, right? I mean, even on days where some days you don't feel like, the old Tony Robbins thing, right? When he shows up, it's maximum energy when he shows up to an event, right? Hey, you're not going to feel like that every day of the week. All right. But you know what? Everybody that works with you and depends on you as a leader, they need to see that. Right? I mean, that's, there was a saying in the SEAL community, false motivation is better than none at all. so some days you just gotta go in there and own it.
It's like when people tell me, so they typically ask you, hey, how's it going? I'm like, I'm amazing. And I'm like, how are you? And they're like, good. And I will return, well, what's it going to take for you to get from good to amazing?
Right.
I say this to my people all the time, like, okay, what's it going to take? There's something. What's that going to be? Even if they don't answer it, they start thinking about it.
No doubt. Yeah. And I think that's hugely important, right? Is to get people focused. It's like focus forward. Mm-hmm. There's, I don't know. I've read it online. There's somebody on LinkedIn or something, their big thing every day is attack your windshield. Right? Don't attack your rearview mirror.
Yeah.
Attack your windshield.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you need to have the rearview mirror so that like I say at work, we're gonna do dumb stuff every now and again. We just don't want to do it twice. Right. And when I say it's dumb stuff, it's born out of ignorance, not mistakes. We just don't know that's not the right way to do something sometimes, right, in life. And that's the cool thing. It's the cool thing about experimentation. It's the cool thing about entrepreneurship. It's the cool thing about leadership is we don't have all the answers, right? So you're going to go out and you're going to say, hey, here's my best guess today on how it should work, right? Look at Edison. He would say, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I figured out 1,000 ways the light bulb didn't work, right? And
how many times do you think he tried that same way that was failed?
What's that?
How many times do you think in one of the ways that it didn't work? How many times do you think he tried that same way?
I know. That's the thing. It's like, no, it's got to work. No. And I think, I'm a big believer in fail forward.
Yeah.
Right. I was dorking around the internet and modern day philosopher Pitbull.
Yeah.
You look today with things. You're looking at a Cuban immigrant who is a massive success story, and when he talks about it, people listen, and they should, right? He's like, hey, I don't fail he's like, failure isn't permanent. Either it works or I learn, right? And I think that's the takeaway, right? Is hugely successful people, like listen to Elon Musk talk about the early days of Tesla. Right, they were basically wanting to say,
when he robbed the original Tesla company, or after he took over?
No, when he took over, right? They originally wanted to basically like chop up a Lotus Esprit and put batteries in it and make it an electric car, right? Well, once they did that, the car was undrivable because of the weight and all this other stuff, and so they had to literally start over again. Right.
It is the one thing that as much as I'm not a fan of Elon Musk, there are certain things about him that I think are excellent, and I take examples of, which is his aspect of first principles design thinking. What they were originally trying to do was iterative thinking. Right. We know a lot more today about how to make a car than what we did in the 1920s, and almost every manufacturer has just iterated upon what we've learned from the assembly line in the 1920s to today. He did the same thing with the rocket. It's like, hey, I'm going to make an electric car. This comes from Jordan Peterson, which I find this fascinating. I'm going to make an electric car, which is basically impossible. I'm going to make I'm going to get the costs down to where it's reasonable, which is basically impossible. Then I'm going to make a spaceship, which is basically impossible. And then I'm going to do it for 1/10 of the cost we're currently doing, which is basically impossible. All those impossible things Elon Musk accomplished.
And I'm going to recover the rocket on a postage stamp in the middle of the ocean. And I'm going to do it repetitively.
Right. So
right.
All those impossible things he did happened because he took what we know today and designed it based on today's knowledge, not iteratively from all of those things from the rockets in the 1950s, 60s, and now completely different.
There's only 2 automakers that have never declared bankruptcy. Tesla's one. What's the other?
Ford.
Yep. And Mulally was a genius in leading up to 2008. I mean, he mortgaged the logo.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say. I don't know that I would have gone as far as what he did in terms of the logo.
Well, you want to talk about like coconuts the size of the church bells, right? That is, you're talking about a business leader with stones.
Yeah. Well, and this is a big reason why I think what Mulally did was brilliant, because what started happening with Ford is they wanted to be like General Motors. So they started buying up all these brands. Yeah. And then you have brand confusion, and you've got too many people, too many, in this case, brands that are too similar. So Mulally sold them all off. It's Ford and it's Lincoln. I don't know if they own anything else other than those 2 at this point. But
because at one point they owned like Land Rover and Jaguar, all the stuff they sold to Tata.
Yeah, they had a lot, and so they've done so much better now that they just have one focus.
One of the great stories about Mulally is when he showed up, they were losing, I don't know the exact number, but it was billions a quarter. And he gets into the management meeting and all the lines on the Gantt charts are green. And he's like, how can they possibly be green? We're losing money left, right, and center. And this goes on for a while. And then, one whatever day of the week it was, one of the mid-level VPs shows up and he's got a couple of yellow lines on his Gantt chart. But he dipped his toe into the we're not perfect water, right? And as the legend goes, Mulally promoted him just because he was willing to tell the truth.
Well, it's an important thing, because I go around even at my own company, and we're, in large part, we are hurting because of COVID, and that is, and the reason why is that one of our big goals is how many new members have you obtained? Well, the ways in which we typically get new members is through car loans. Well, there's no cars, right? It's there's nothing there for them to get, whether used or new. There's no inventory, so we're way behind on our numbers. And then even in the mortgages, we're just replacing one with one. There's no net new mortgages. It's, hey, this person sold their house and they bought a house, because it's there's just people just move in different places. Very few are going from renters to new home buyers in this particular market. But the point where I was going is kind of similar to what we were talking about with Mulally. I go, how are we reporting everything as green when we're not even meeting half of our goals?
Right.
And there's like crickets around the room. I'm like, look, think about all those companies that were successful during the first big, huge stock market crash. Everyone basically, went out of business. Those that didn't bought up companies, and then they increased their net worth quite quickly. Well, right. What are we going to do? Right. What are we going to do to be this next big credit union when the industry isn't the way it is? Let's stop thinking about today. Where do we want to be 5 years from now?
Or 5 weeks from now, right? I mean, you have to start with some measure of forward thinking.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be, I've said this, when you start looking at design thinking and then productizing things, you as a chief product officer, for example, you have a roadmap, right? I would say the roadmap is the number one way that a company defends itself against its own worst instincts, right? Because you become a victim of now, right? Sales guys walk in and they're like, hey, if we do this one thing, we'll get a contract for $15 million, right? Or whatever the number, big number. I'm like, all right, go get the contract. Not like, like using hope as a strategy, right? But you don't have to think.
That's not a good strategy?
What's that?
Using hope isn't a good strategy?
No, it's not strategery, not even a little bit, right? And but this concept that like we get in the now, right? And there's the now and there's the long now, right? There's a society called the Long Now Society, and they contemplate solving problems 10,000 years from now, right? Most companies don't contemplate solving problems 10 months from now.
It's very true. A lot of people, like, they ask, like, why is it that it seems like whatever I say eventually comes true? And I just said to them, well, how long do you spend thinking? In a normal day, how much time do you spend thinking? The further up the ladder you go, or the hierarchy you go, the more time you have to spend thinking. And so it only appears as if I know what's going to happen because I just thought about many things.
You contemplated it.
Right? So yeah. I said, and then the next questions eventually come up with, well, how did you get to that process? I said, I just tried to predict what was going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then eventually a week from now, and then a month from now, and then 6 months, and then a year, then 3 years. I try to, do that because it's just like with meditation. The longer you can hold no thought, the more thoughts will come to you. And so you just practice.
There's a great guy. His name is Don DePani. He's called the monk with a MacBook. He was an engineering student in India and decided he wanted to, who eventually became his guru and said, I want to do it. And the guy's like, finish college first. Right? And so he did. And then he went to the monastery, and he has a great way of talking about self and presence and understanding. And it all emanates from energy, right? You went to sleep last night, you woke up, you got a full battery. Like, you've got as much energy as you're going to have. And in the old physics problem, that's one big force vector, right? And as things during the day start pulling at you left and right, it reduces the amount of forward force that you have, right? Because you're using energy on things other than just driving as far as you can in any given day on a thing. And so in the way he talks about it, and I think it resonates really well with me. In your head, you have all your thoughts. You have work, love, family, sex, buying things, what I want to do in the future, anger, love, every emotion that you could ever have. And Don DePani says when somebody says they're angry, he treats energy like a ball of light. And that energy that you have in your brain is focusing on a place called anger. Right. And so how quickly can I take myself and move to another place? And I'm here to tell you, some days it's hard, right? And it should be hard, because if you're a passionate human being and you want certain things out of life, you're going to get angry. You're going to get happy. You're going to get sad, but you're going to do it in ways that are, some people would say, extreme, right? And none of that's bad, right? None of it's bad at all, because I think, when people talk about high blood pressure and all those other things, is they start suppressing these emotions because of what other people are going to think. And like, get it out there. I mean, don't be an F and A-hole to everybody in your life, but you have to express those emotions. And how much energy am I going to do that? Well, I think anger is the one, right? Because it's easy when somebody says, hey, I'm focusing all on love and all that stuff, right? But when you focus, there's a certain point in your life where you've got to focus on the anger you have, right? And either get rid of it or thing. And I think the times when people are can be continuously or recidivatively angry is when they don't feel like they're getting closure, right? And that takes an energy toll, right? But here's the thing, like you said, every day, what am I thinking about and why? Right? And is some of it good, some of it bad? I want more good than bad. It's got to be 51%, right? On the good stuff.
Okay. How long do you think it's acceptable to be angry for? Like, when you feel angry?
I don't know, because it depends on what it is, right? And I think sometimes when it comes out as anger, but especially when it's with another person, right? If it's something, I think you're going to be angry until you get closure, right? And I'm not telling you it's good, but I do believe that if you don't understand why, or you think that somebody is not being full about, obviously if you're angry, something adverse happened, right? So about that situation, you're going to continue to have anger.
Yeah.
You can pick a time limit.
Yeah, and so for me, where I was going, I feel like the remaining, you're never going to make a good decision when you're angry.
I agree with that.
And so, it's okay to be angry, but that change that from anger to eventually disappointment or something. So then you can get into a frame of mind to make a good decision about what to do next.
Right. I think as you mature, I was going to say get older, but some people are my age and they're still not mature, right?
As you mature, the only person I know that's over 150 years old.
But as you mature, I think, especially in leisure life, you have to have the ability to compartmentalize. All right. And I think that, personally, I think one of the best skills I have is I can compartmentalize.
Now,
and I can do
that prior to being in the Navy, or is it or you've always been able to?
I think I've really kind of sharpened that skill in 20 years of being a team guy. And sometimes yes, sometimes no, because I would submit that, certainly after 9/11, or actually even before, but you deploy, you'd come home. If you knew you were going back, you were still over there, right? I mean, you weren't in the now. But I think that one of the things that I've always been good at is, hey, what do I have to do right now? Right? And to the point where I can block pretty much everything else out. I can go back to being angry, happy, sad, other things when it's time to, but in the moment, I can focus very sharply on what needs to get done, and probably not in a good way. I can also focus very sharply on what needs to get done when I'm angry, right? And a lot of it is, even now, it's like, why would you do that? You ask somebody why they would do something, when they say why they did something, and they say, I don't know, it's infuriating to me. It's actually, it makes me go ballistic.
Why?
Right? Because here's the thing, you're an adult. Like, what do you mean? We had this adverse interaction, and you were purposeful in it, because you're going to tell me you don't know why you did it? No, you did. You know exactly why you did it. You just don't want to tell me.
Yeah. So speaking of that, which is kind of, it's not a true funny story, but it's kind of funny. So we went and did cryotherapy several weeks ago. And this particular one, we do it often, but about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so the little guy wanted to know how cold it was, so they kind of let him go in there, not turn it on, and we're like, don't touch the sides. It's still extremely cold.
Put his tongue on it?
No, he couldn't. That would have been probably better. But he put both of his arms on it. And so he gets, I don't know what you call it, but basically level 1 frostbite.
Right.
Because it's that cold. And he's like, little guy, what did you do to your arms? Oh, nothing. No, clearly something. Did you touch the tank when we told you not to? No, I didn't do that. Are you sure? Because it certainly looks like it.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? I didn't. No, you did.
You didn't do it on purpose, right? I mean,
right.
That's and that's, I think, with kids, that's the hard thing. It's like, hey, there's doing something and there's doing something accidentally,
right?
And being able to to say, hey, I did it accidentally is a different animal.
Yeah, I mean, I think he didn't believe it. Now, thankfully, because it's not like he was holding it there. He touched it and was like, "Oh my gosh, it's really cold." But it was so cold that it immediately dried the skin, and it's, thankfully it's just, I don't know if it's stage 1 or whatever, level 1, whatever you want to call it, but it was enough to where you just put Eucerin on it for a couple of days, and it's, and you're healed. But still, doesn't feel good.
I tell you what, I'm a big fan of cryotherapy.
I love it. I absolutely love it. It's also for me, it's an exercise in mind over matter. I just get into that meditative state very quickly, focus on my breath, and I know every time I hear a beep, another 30 seconds is gone. I've got 6 beeps. And
see, I can do anything for 30 seconds at a time.
Yeah. Right. I'm like,
that's, it's funny, a lot of times when I speak, I never really, as part of my speaking, I never really talk about the whole SEAL thing, right? But I always, for the most part, when possible, I always take questions at the end of talking. And the first question I always get is hey, how'd you make it through SEAL training? I'm like, I just didn't quit. Right. And during the talks, I always talk about how life can be complicated. It's usually never hard. Right. And they're like, well, it has to be harder than that. I'm like, it's not harder, it's more complicated. Right. And when you talk about, like in my buds class, we started with 160 folks. We went to Hell Week with 106, and we got out of Hell Week with 13. And the 13 of us had one thing in common: we wouldn't say no. Right? I didn't walk up and ring the bell. Right? It was that simple to me. But how do you get there?
So,
right?
How many what would happen if 100 of you just didn't say no?
Well, there'd be a class with 100 people in it.
So they don't. So there is no maximum number.
No,
that they would do. Okay, I was just curious.
I mean, think about this: there's room for everybody that shows up in a SEAL team, right? The big problem and certainly after 9/11 and in the past 20 years is you wanted more numbers, right? We wanted the end state to be to have a larger community of SEALs. But if you're not going to compromise the integrity of the training, you're going to end up with the same result, right? Now, it's the way that the session happens is a little bit different than what I went through, but the net result is still the same, right? There's only a finite number of knuckleheads that'll just be like, no, I'm going to do this, right? And it should be that way, right? In anything in life, anything that's hard or that's difficult, you should have to think about it, right? And I know, like, when you talk, like, I think, everybody always focuses on Hell Week. But like, guys get through Hell Week because they come up with mechanisms, like you said, every 30 seconds. Well, during Hell Week, you eat 4 times a day. And as long as you don't fall asleep while you're eating, then there's, 30 minutes to an hour of your life where the instructors aren't messing with you. They're letting you eat, they're letting you relax, because then you got to go back out and turn it on, right? I mean, at some point, everybody's like, hey, I'm just going to go from meal to meal. I can, I eat 4 times a day, so I can do anything for 6 hours, right? And as you go down, you get to reset, and then you go, right? One of my buds classmates, a great friend of mine. We were down to 13 people in Hell Week, and we're in the pool in the middle of the night, on the other side of the base. And he just gets out of the pool and starts walking off. Like, he's like, I'm done. Right? And we're like, no way. And one of the instructors looks at us in the pool, and we all like shook our heads no. And he just basically nudged him as he's walking alongside the pool and pushed him back in the water. He swam back over to us and he was fine. We never talked about it. But it was one of those things where over the years, like, I've seen him and I've never asked him about it. Right? But he just got in his head, I'm done.
Maybe he just had to go take a leak and you're not supposed to pee in the pool.
Somebody, this pool's like, this is an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It's deep. I mean, the particulate matter in there, I don't even want to know, right? But But you think it's like he didn't want to go. He was just like, hey, I'm going to go for a walkabout, right, for a minute. And one of the instructors looked at us and was like, hey, as a class, what do you want to do? Because we were down to that number of people that gets you to be cohesive, right? And I mean,
is that what you think the perhaps, I don't know if it's true or not, but do you think that's the limit, the maximum amount of people in any class that can function in a cohesive way?
I think so, and I think it finds its own level. I can remember the commanding officer of the center, the training house, was this guy named Captain Bailey, Vietnam era guy. Really, I mean, even after going to Buds, I got to know him a little bit better, and it's just a great human being, right? Just a hell of a man. And I can, just like one of the things, like when you're going over this training, you're in the proximity of there's an instructor next to somebody all the time, right? And it's just I think it's one of the great hallmarks of the community is like the training phase. You're never without leadership. There's always somebody there. Now, when you're going through it, you're like, well, just go away for a while. I just need to get my personal thing together. But when having looked back on it, 30 plus years now, there's a level of attention to detail and caring about the next generation, right? And that is how do you want to talk about the ultimate pay it forward, right? Is thinking I've had friends of mine that went out and were instructors at Buds. I was, I never did that. And it was like, there's always, I think it's the job of more senior people to remind these young instructors when they're losing their minds on students and like that, hey, remember you were there and you did not get early release from training because you were this shit hot soon to be frogman.
Right.
It's a process, right? There has to be the standard, and the standard is high, but you don't have to be a dick the whole time you're doing it, right? I mean, every time you see anything about SEALs on TV and movies, it's always, to me, it always comes off like it's real Marine-ish, like they're yelling and screaming. It's like some of the worst torture physically I've ever endured. I was laughing my ass off while I was doing it because the guy that was torturing us was so funny, he should have been up on a stage. Right? That's the hallmark. When you talk about great leadership, it's like we're going to endure things that are extremely difficult in our lives. How do you manage it with grace and laughter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the lesson I learned from SEAL training.
Yeah, so that's probably the reason why you won't ever see a Buds class graduate 100 people, because it's highly improbable that 100 people will focus in a cohesive way.
I agree, and here's the thing. There's a lot of people that say they want to. There's this. I can't remember. The guy's name just escaped me, but I never forget this guy. Like and I have another buddy of mine. You remember Dave that worked with us at Silent Circle for a while. He and I were Buds classmates, and he had written a great article about his boat crew. We're in the same Buds class, and this is before Hell Week. He wrote this article about his boat crew. I don't even know half the people he was talking about because none of them made it through Hell Week, right? And I've said this before in another podcast that like I don't know anybody that didn't graduate Buds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, of course.
I mean, to me, the minute they left, they were non-people,
right?
And we were focused on the people that wanted to be there, right?
Yeah, it's the same reason why I said that once I figure out that you are not a net giver, you're just out.
Yeah,
I don't think about you again.
There was and I won't say his name because folks would know who he is in the SEAL community, but there was a cat that quit Buds in my class, and I don't know, a couple years, 2 or 3 years later, I was at SEAL Team 2, and I'm walking down the hallway, and all of a sudden I see this guy, and I look at his name tag, and I'm like, that looks like the same cat that I went to Buds with. What's he doing here? Right? And this is before guys got their tridents when they showed up at a SEAL team, right? You would show up at a SEAL team, you would go through tactical training, and then you would get your trident, right? So him not walking around, and we had support people that were corpsmen, intel specialists, and everything like that. And I walked around, and I looked at him, and I go, "Hey, were you in 150 for a while?" He goes, "Yeah." And he had graduated in another class, whatever it was, and I was like, "Man, good for you." He goes, "Oh man, it was much easier than 150." It's like the worst thing you could ever say to me.
Yeah.
Right? Was it easier, or was he more mentally prepared?
He was more prepared, physically.
Right.
And mentally.
But that's what I'm saying. So training's training. It's going to eat everybody up. He just was more prepared to go back and do it.
Yeah, I mean, which I think is, I mean, hey, good for him. He found his breaking point, and then he knew, okay, tomorrow my breaking point is further, so I'm going to do it again.
Right.
Maybe he would have in the next, Bud's class, maybe he would have broke again, but maybe the third time. Like, I mean, I don't know how many times, if there's a limit to how many times you can try, but it was not easier. He was just more prepared. His body and mind.
His mind. Everything over the years, I'll come to that. Everything that you do to get through through SEAL training is mental.
I believe it.
Right? I mean, because if you think about it, we're the only special forces training on the planet that you're not graded individually.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's, because how I am, I want a standards-based organization, right? If the standard is you have to run 4 miles in boots in 31 minutes, if you get 30:58 or you get 28 minutes, it doesn't matter to me. You met the standard. Right. And everybody is going to be different in that group of standards. Right. And then once you have that, once you create the standards-based organization, right, then you talk about giving, because everybody meets a minimum physical standard in this case. Right. Now you're all graded on how you perform as a team. And I think that those are the life lessons, right? Because how many times do you really do something by yourself, right? You're not. You're dependent on the folks that work with you. I'm dependent on the folks that work with me, and they're dependent on me, right? And once you create and manage and grow that interdependency, that's when you have great teams. That's when you have great learning moments. That's when you can fail forward and nobody loses their mind, right? And I think, with us, when you building UAVs, and if you have an experimental aircraft and it crashes, what'd you learn from it? Right? Like, I don't ever want to do that again. Whatever caused that mishap, I don't want to ever happen, because most of the times when you do fail in life, it's nothing more than a failure of imagination. You never imagined that outcome could happen. Otherwise, you would have mitigated it prior to. Right. And the bigger, better, badass team you have and group of people that are like-minded and thinking in the same way, the less opportunity you have, because somebody's going to be like, hey, I know what we're thinking, but that doesn't sound like it's a really good idea, even if nobody else hears the noise. Right. You want to get to that point where, and it's, one of the great things about the SEAL community is you have after action review, right? Where you sit around and table, everybody takes their rank off metaphorically, and you have the ability to constructively criticize others, even the boss. Like, hey, that wasn't your best effort, right? And you have to get thick skin, and you have to learn how to take it, right? How many of us know somebody that's never wrong?
No,
everybody.
Right. I'm the person I know that's never wrong. So therefore,
get on the couch, man. We're gonna have a therapy session. Let's get it in. Put your feet up.
Well, I think that's the big learning moment for me, or at least the aha moment for me, was when I switched my mentality from having to always be right to testing if I was either going to accept or reject a null hypothesis. So testing being wrong. When I switched that, which was through the doctoral process, that's when my career really started to take off. Not because I went from being a high-end tech guy to now being a thought leader, which combined with the ability on technology. But that was that pivotal point for me. Right. I think everybody who's going to be a leader has that moment where you transition from manager to leader. Right. And I think a lot of it starts with being a thought leader, right? And I think you said it best, like how much time a day do you spend thinking? Right. And lost in thought, and some of it's very productive, and some of it is like, cleaning out the closet, right? I got to get rid of these. I need to express myself internally and get rid of these thoughts because they're limiting where I can go. Yeah. And I try to spend 2 to 3 hours every day just thinking. Right. weekends not as much. And weekends I'm much more doing things that kind of give me back my energy for the coming week. But Monday through Friday, I definitely spend 2 to 3 hours each day. Sometimes it means I get up earlier, especially on Wednesdays. Wednesdays are my most challenging day of the week.
Why is that?
So I position my week to where it starts off slow. So Monday afternoon is when all of a sudden things start to go. I kind of keep Monday morning somewhat free to kind of make sure I've planned things accordingly. Tuesdays is pretty busy up until about about 11 o'clock. It's pretty heavy in the morning and kind of light. Wednesdays I'm in meetings from 8:15 till 3 o'clock.
Oof.
I mean, I have a couple of little breaks, but not much, like 15 minutes. Because I try to keep, most meetings are, for me, I want them done in 45 minutes, even though it's scheduled them for an hour, because people need an opportunity to, go grab a cup of coffee or something.
Yeah.
But that's the day but for me, I know once 3 o'clock is over, I'm good for the rest of the week, because I know Thursday, now it's going to wind back down. Thursday morning, I've only got a little bit. So Thursday afternoon and Fridays are days that I really spend more time thinking and reflecting. Did I get everything accomplished that I said I was going to get accomplished? And if not, why? What? I don't ever ask why. I go, what would it have taken to have accomplished those things?
Right. I think internally and externally, internally yourself and externally to your people and I like the word why. Why are we doing things this way? Right. And I like what's it going to take for us to be better? Right. And things like that. And I think as long as you're challenging yourself and to a greater extent, the organization, right? Because if you're challenging the organization should challenge you as a leader, right? And I think a lot of people miss that, right? They think, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. You have to put yourself and everybody that works with you in a position to be great.
Yep.
How do you do that?
I was interviewing someone on Friday, and I let this candidate know, because they're like, well, what's your style? I said, look, I'm going to be very honest with you. My style adapts based on the people that I happen to be, leading at any given time. I said, but there's one thing that's consistent, and if you're unable to accept this, we won't work well together, because I'm going to push you harder than any other person you will ever meet to be better tomorrow than you are today. And if you aren't up for that challenge, and you're not up for making your people that report into you up to that challenge, this isn't going to work well.
We're not going to be besties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's it. I said, because I kind of explained, because my style changes based on the person, but there's two core concepts. That aspect of being better tomorrow, and the other part is loyalty. When we have meetings, it's Chatham House rules. Everyone's opinion is welcome, but at a certain point in time, I'm going to say, time for opinions is over, and now we're going to test. And when we walk out of this room, even if you disagree with me, your answer is, we're testing it, which is not a lie. You don't say, right, I don't think this is going to work. Your job is to do everything you can to basically prove it will work or it won't work. That's it. Your job is to prove it. And those people that can't do that also don't work well for me.
It's funny. He's one of my oldest mentors. He was one of my first bosses in the Navy, and he would walk in, and when we had, as young team guys, we had gone through more than a few OICs, all right? And it got to the point where the commanding officers, and we were a rough group of guys, and it got to the point where the CO came to us and goes, hey, this is the last guy you're getting. After this, I'm going to start firing you guys. I'm done firing these lieutenants, right? And he came in and he knew the right tack to take with us, right? You had a bunch of, in a room full of alphas, you had a shitload of alphas in this platoon, right? And we were hard on each other. We were hard on bosses, right? And he basically came in and said, this is why today, he's a guy that when I have good things happen in my life, I'll just text them and say thank you. I won't. There's no, there's no amplifying information on either side of thank you. It is just thank you.
Yeah.
Right. And we've gotten to that point in our relationship over the past 30 plus years to where we'll catch up with it. Right. But at the time, I want to express gratitude because most everything good that happens in my life today is because that jackass at some point was riding me like a rented mule to be better than I thought I could be. Right. And I say that with all the love in the world. All right. And, but he would walk in and he goes, all right, here's the deal. We all have an equal opportunity to die or to be great or to do anything else. So with that in mind, we're all going to have a say in what goes on. But eventually, I'm going to make a decision, and every one of you is going to walk out of here and talk about it like you thought it up and it was the best thing you ever did. Because that's how we win.
Yep.
All right. And he goes, if you can't do that, then we're going to have a problem. Periodically, I'm going to walk in and say, this is an arbitrary decision. And it means the time for discussion is over. We're not having a discussion. He goes, and most of the time it's going to be because I've been told what to do by somebody that's way senior to me.
Yep.
Right. And with us at that time, just that feeling like, hey, we have some measure of control over our daily existence and our life with what we do and why. That's what we were missing with everybody else. And he figured that out, or he intrinsically, that was part of who he is. That's what made him a great leader. Right. And the funny thing about it is his leadership style at the time wasn't like, he wasn't, before he got to us, wasn't the number one officer, in that pay grade, right? In the command, like somebody else was. And somebody else was that was a lot harder to deal with. That was very autocratic and everything like that. And he took a bunch of dudes that were young and hungry and arrogant and hateful and lovable and everything else, and said, hey, how can I manage that? You know what? Let's let them feel like, let's let them have their say. All right. And a lot of times, even he would say, he goes, I never thought of that. Right. And so what he was doing was bringing out the best in us. But at the end of it, we were also bringing out the best in him.
Absolutely. It's got to be that way. He makes you better, you make him better, or in life, she.
Right.
It's got to be that way, because you just keep that way. The bar keeps getting, is able to rise faster.
Right. The tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
Right. And, even now, like I start talking about him, I get all verklempt about the whole thing, and I want to call him after we get done. Right. Because he had that big an influence on my life. Like he's the one that said to me, we're out swimming in the water one night, just two of us were surface swimming to go to a target, and we're on a training dive. And, we've got this incredible distance to surface swim before we start diving. And he's like, hey, it was every time you go into a social situation, I want you to walk in there and stand around for about 5 or 10 minutes and try to figure out who the idiot is. If you can't, it's you. And adjust your day accordingly.
Yeah.
I wanted to stop, jump out of the water right there and be like, you're a genius, dude. I was 24, 25 years old, at the time. And it was just, it was things like that. Right. And he had been an enlisted guy before and then became an officer. So he was, most of the young lieutenants were about the same age I was, right? He was a little bit older. And it was just sage advice all the time. It wasn't complex. Like, you didn't have to overthink it, but it was just like, he would, and I think on my buddy Monty's podcast, we were talking about it one day. He was like, he goes, I want to put you in front of everybody on earth to show how engaging, intelligent young frogmen can be, but only for 6 minutes. And he just stopped and kind of walked away. I'm like, hey, wait a second. I got to catch that. Like, I want to know. And he's like, he goes, because at 6 minutes, the wheels come off the car with you. Right. And over time, over the years, and I joked with him about him the last time I saw him down at the beach was, all these years I wanted to get out. I wanted to help people. I had a message. I thought I had a message I wanted to say, and I wanted to do all these things. Well, in reality, I am an introvert that likes to do extroverted things. Right. And that I would look at people that were extroverts and go, okay, in order to have that message, in order to be out in public, I got to behave that way. And it was so counter to who I am that I could hold it together in his mind for 6 minutes, and at 6 minutes and 1 second, the wheels came off the cart, and it was really bad, right?
Well, maybe that's probably why I try to keep the show at 60 minutes because it's just 10 intervals of 6. So 60 minutes, 1 second.
Obviously, over the years, I've overcome all that, right? But it's like he was the first one, and this was his daughter lived down in Virginia Beach, so periodically he comes down and he'll like, hey, you want to go out to breakfast and things like that, and so this was about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. We just went out to breakfast and we were talking about where I am. So he's largely retired now, and talking about what I'm doing, where I'm at, and like that. He basically broke that out, right? And I walked away from that, and at the time, it really it fundamentally started to twist how I thought, and really like it put me in a mode where okay, I've got to do something to be better, right? And then through meeting other people and everything like that, it's like all of a sudden you realize like, hey, I'm fighting myself as much as I'm fighting anything else, right? And that battle within yourself defines the quicker you can tamp down or deal with the battle of yourself, the better leader you can be.
Oh yeah, I believe that.
You know, it's funny because like he was kind of saying it as a compliment back then and things like that. That hey, this is it, and it's like I walked away and like literally driving home. I got home and I don't remember the drive, right? Because I was so contemplative about what he said and what impact that was going to have on me that I completely lost track of what I was doing. You know, and it's a good thing I've lived there for over 30 years because I might still be driving around.
Yeah, right? Yeah. You're able to go on autopilot because you already know the directions.
Yeah.
It is definitely. I mean, all this comes back on why I help people is because we become better ourselves when we help others. And I think many people, but from a leadership aspect, they want to appear to be the smartest person in the room, and they don't show and that's why I think they wind up having they can't go any further because they're afraid to show their vulnerability. They're afraid to say, I don't know the answer here.
Right.
There's not. I believe that's a strength in that because you're trusting your team. Like, look, I don't know. So let's start talking about it, and eventually we are going to figure this out. But they don't want to do that. They want to appear as if they always have the answers, and I think that hurts them. That hurts their growth.
Oh, it totally does. And we've all been there at some point in our kind of your leadership journey, and then all of a sudden, once you say, "Hey, I'm going to give up on all the bullshit I tell myself about who I am and how great I am," right? And walk in the room and go, "Hey, this is the problem. I don't have the answer. Who does?" Right? The favorite hour or so of my week is when I have the management meeting with all my direct reports. Right? We go through what we've done, what we're doing, and what we're going to do. And I'm able to ask some really hard questions I don't necessarily know the answers to.
Sometimes I don't even know the question to ask, and I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I don't know yet.
I love learning from these guys.
Yeah.
It's like we joke around like your job is to build UAVs, mine is to run the business, and in the middle, I'm going to give you the benefit of my experience to the best I can in that giving. But what I need from you is I don't know all the answers. Am I a quick learner? I'd like to think so, right? But on a given daily basis, when I walk out and say, hey, I get a phone call from my bosses, so to speak, and I'm like, hey, this is what we got to do. How are we going to get there? Right? But I also think that part of that giving is in a business setting is you have responsibility and accountability. I'm going to make you accountable for as much as I can make you accountable for. I'm going to give it all the way to you. I'm a guy. I'm the senior guy. Like I'm not getting promoted again. Right. So I don't have my job is to make you better. And I'm going to give you all, I can't give away the responsibility. That's mine. Right. And I'm always going to own that. And I always want to own it, but I'm going to make you accountable for as much as humanly possible. And I want you to take that level of accountability that I've given you and parcel out as much of it to the folks that work for you and make that work all the way down. Because when we're doing that, that's when we're going to get tremendous decision-making because I'm forcing you at some point to contemplate things you hadn't contemplated. And I want people to come to me and go, hey, I don't understand this. Well, a lot of it is, my field of view is to have 360-degree coverage. And what I don't know and what I can't cover myself, because I'm not going to know everything, I plug in people that are smarter than me on all those things. And I think great leaders do that. They go out and they go, hey, I think as important as knowing what you're good at, it's more important to know what you're not good at. Because once you identify what you're not good at, it allows you to go out and hire people and surround yourself with people that are good at that. And then it's your job to say, hey, you're really good at this, I'm really good at this, and I want to give you the benefit of my experience. Right? And that's how you start having these conversations where everybody in the room gets smarter because you're all talking.
Yeah, I take it one step further with myself, which is I focus on the extremes for me. Things that I'm not good at, and therefore I'm never going to do. And then
Right.
The things that I'm extremely good at, and that's the only things I'm going to focus on. The things that I'm good at, I'm going to also delegate out, because then I can help mentor those people in those areas that I'm good. But I'm going to focus for myself, and what I'm good is what I'm exceptional at.
Right. I do the same thing. And I think that's hugely additive to the organization.
Yeah.
That the quicker you can get everybody thinking about things they've not contemplated that are larger than they imagine, the better off you're going to be.
Because, and it gets in look, there's, you've got 100% of yourself. And so I really focus it, like, for me, 95% of what I could do needs to be delegated out. And I'm only going to focus on that 5%.
Right.
For me, if you're breaking it down into some numbers like that, and I just go, it's the same thing when we've talked about, focusing on your strengths, right? Your strengths are those things to me that you're exceptional at. Focus on that.
Right.
Focus on those people in your like I get flack for this from a lot of people, but we've talked about it, and that, hey, the square root of any organization is doing 50% of the work, and the people in that organization doing the other 50%. So you better focus on those people, that square rooted number of people of yours, your top performers, because if you don't, if one of those top performers leaves, you're
not having a good day.
Yeah. Yes, everyone's replaceable. Sure. But how much is it going to cost to replace them?
Exactly. Why would you put yourself in a position to have to replace you? And sales organizations do this all the time. They take the top performers, then they cut half their territory, they give it to some non-performer and say, hey, coach that guy up. Well, what am I going to get paid for coaching that guy up, right? In sales in particular, it's like every minute I'm not, always be closing, every minute I'm not ABC, then I'm not making money, right? And we've metricked people to death rather than focusing on, hey, I don't need to look at the dashboard. I need to look at your numbers. I need to look at your productivity, right? Sales is easy because, hey, here's your quota. You made your quota. You didn't make your quota, right? But think about this. In the Pierce's law of the square root of the total number of people on a project, Amazon hires 332 people a day on average.
Yep.
And I don't know off the top of my head, what do they got, like 200,000 employees now? Some phenomenal number.
This is another one of those moments that that people could realize, because everyone kept going, Dan, why are you opening a distillery in Elkhart? I said, because it is a great location and it's got a lot of hardworking people that deserve a better opportunity, and it's going to be the place. That's why Amazon just decided to open up another facility.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I should take 100% credit for why Amazon did it, but I should at least get like 90% of the credit.
60% of the time, it works all the time. So the square root of 200,000 is 447.
Yeah.
Think about that. You have an organization of 200,000 people, and if you apply Pierce's law to it, less than 500 people are providing you with 50% of the value.
And it's probably still true.
Oh no, but that's a great, when you start, you say that, and I've gone into sales organizations and been like, hey, how many salespeople do you have? And they're like, oh, we got 27. Like, so you have 5 people that are killing it and 1 or 2 folks that are B students and everybody else is useless. So like, how'd you know? Right? It's almost an immutable law.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because I tell them the thing that I want to have, like my goal is how can I get the square root plus the square root of my organization doing 50% of the work. That's my goal.
Square root times 2.
Yep. That's what I want. Now, that is an improbable goal, but it's still my goal. Like, okay, how can I get these other people to also be productive? And I feel like that trickles down. All right. So if I focus on my top people, and then my top people are mentoring to find out, because sometimes you don't know from the junior folks that are in the room is whether or not they're capable of in the future being one of those top performers. So how quickly can we find that out and get them there? And that's why I only hire senior people and junior people. I don't ever hire people in the middle. I just don't. The junior people, I want to get them to the middle as fast as I possibly can.
Yeah, you want to start them on their way, right? I mean, it's from the earliest days when you and I met, that was one of the things that I've always enjoyed about it. Is like you're like I am. You want to be a teacher. It's intrinsic in you to want to. Here's I want to give stuff away, and I want to teach people. I want to grow people, right? I mean, look at where Mika's at now.
Yeah.
Think about where she started and where she's at. I mean, she's killing it now. She's kicking ass.
Yeah, she started her own company. She said she's going to give you a call.
What does she want to help me with?
Well, because she started this whole for herself, a cybersecurity consulting company.
No, I know that.
I'm like in doing different, basically going in and doing the risk assessments and things of that nature. I'm like, well, hey, give TK a call because I know they have a shared services model when it comes to technology, but no one probably knows what the assessment is. Like where are the holes? And she's good at it.
I tell her story all the time, right? When we talk about it, like when I was there and she's moving stuff around, and she's like doing everything as a root user on a production server. after my ticker got back to beat normal on that, but it's like to go from there to what she's doing now. It took it. Yes, she's extremely intelligent and all those things, right? But it also took somebody like you to say, hey, I know what you can be. And it's outside of anything you thought you learned in college or anything else. I know what you can be. And I'm going to challenge you to be that and everything more. Right? And I think that when you start talking about leaders and who we want to be in charge of things, it's folks that focus on not what if you treat somebody as they are, they'll always be the same. If you treat them as what you think they can be, they're going to surprise you and they're going to be better than what you think. And I think that for any leader is the thing. I remember when we were doing the UI UX for the Black Phone, and I tried to get the guy that had done the UI UX for the Kindle and the Fire Phone and everything. He was working for another company. I brought him in and we started talking. I soon realized that whatever we could pay him in our little startup wasn't going to meet his minimum standard of excellence for getting paid. But it was a very interesting conversation because anybody who's been like talking to John Callis about what it was like to work for Steve Jobs, talking to this guy, what it was like to work for Bezos. And, I was like, well, what was your direct contact with him? He goes, when we were doing the UI UX for the Kindle and the Fire Phone, I mean, he was on it every day of the week. Why? Because it was ultimately important to him, right? And at one point, remember on the Fire Phone, their big thing was a 3D mapping. Like it was the first thing, it's like I said, it's the best Android phone nobody ever bought. But
next to ours.
What's that? Yeah. But 3D map, I don't know. I think we actually might have sold more BP2s than we sold the Fire Phones, right? Just with Will selling them on the border.
Yeah.
But this concept, and he goes, he would walk in all the time, and there was a place where they got stuck, right? The thought process, the imagination, everything, they were stuck. They didn't know how to move forward, and they were like, he came in the room and said, "What's going on?" He's like, I don't think we're gonna be able to do this." He's like, "Of course you are." And they're like, no, you don't understand. He goes, "No, you don't understand. Every one of you is extremely intelligent and engaging. That's why you're here. I know you can do it. Stop focusing on what you think you can't do and start focusing on the solution to the problem." He turns around and walks out. that's a great leader, right? Have you ever seen the video? You guys have to, it's Steve Jobs getting worked over by one of his engineers at like a company meeting. Have you ever seen that video?
I might have.
He ends up and it's like developers, they'll focus on their little piece, like I'm building this and we can't live without it, right? And they get very myopic about what they do and their little piece of technology. And one of the developers stands up at the company meeting and says, first off, I can't believe you're disregarding this and moving in this direction, and goes off on that for a bit. And then he says, and the other thing is, I just want to know what you've been doing for the last few years, because this is a galactically boneheaded, like basically just calls him out for like things he's sitting in. And Steve Jobs pauses for more than a minute. Like you could tell his initial reaction was like, get rid of this guy, F you, and get out of here. But he stops.
He probably still did do that.
What's that?
Get rid of the guy.
I know that's what you would do. Like,
well, no, I want the challenge, but based on everything that I've heard about Steve Jobs, like he was, I'm not a fan of Steve Jobs.
Here's the thing. I don't know if it's a fan, but you talk about a seminal leader that turned a company around. You can argue about how he did it.
Yeah.
Right. I think as he got older, when he came back to Apple, he was a different person than before he left. Right. At some point in life, everybody gets humbled. And how do you react once you've been humbled? Right. And I think when he came back, he was a different human being. But he paused, and then he started talking about the fact that he said, look, you're probably right. That little piece of technology is probably really awesome. But we're thinking bigger. We're thinking about the ecosystem. We're thinking about all these things. And here's all the great things that we're doing and all the great people we're doing it with. And every one of you's in this room, it goes off for about, 5 or 10 minutes. And totally turns it around from, hey, I can basically tell this guy, I can wear him out and get him out of the room and he's done. But no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use it as a moment to say, hey, I appreciate the fact that you're passionate about what you do, to the point where you metaphorically put the gun to your head from a career perspective and walked in the room and said, hey, yeah, I think you're an idiot. I know you're in charge. But to the point where he turned it around and used it as a learning lesson to empower everybody to grow and be better than they were tomorrow. As hard as difficult as he could be, and I believe he was every bit as difficult and probably more than people say. There were times in order to be a great leader that he had to humble himself.
Right. Perhaps the second time he did, I don't know, but I think, the real lesson there is, and you've kind of told the story of Joe. I think it was Joe from Silent Circle. Hey, that's my opinion. How come you did it? Like, you don't seem to understand. Your opinion is right here. Right. So it's one little piece. The aspect of the leader is to be going, look, your little piece, I'm going to be combining with many other little pieces that's going to be much larger. And so when that aspect of the great leader is once they get everyone to realize that they are a small part of something much larger than all of them combined.
Yeah, it's the chain, right? Yeah. You like one link breaks and we're done. And I need your opinion, right? And I need your advice. I need your counsel. And that, I think even like every day I try to widen the aperture of all the folks that work with us, right? And give them and let them know, hey, here, where you're at today is not where I imagined you to be a year from now, or even a day from now, right? And I think as great leaders, when you walk in the building in the morning, is how do I walk in and get that energy going? We're coming up on a very important event to the company in the next week or so, and there's a lot of work that has to be done. I typically, the guys work 410s, and when I say they work 410s, they actually probably work 412s because nobody just mails it in at 40 hours. I mean, all the lads are working their butts off. But I went in the office, I'm in the office on Friday, and almost everybody's there because they understand the importance of what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks. And it's not that they felt they had to be there. It's, because typically I'm on the road and I'm not, but I was in there and we were in, but without having said anything, everybody understands the gravity of what we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks. And they were all there. Yeah. I don't know if that would have happened 4 months ago, that kind of thing. Right. But now it's like, hey, again, they came to me and they said, hey, we want to work 410s. I'm like, all right, cool. All right. And I said, but you understand there's some days we're gonna have to, you know, do the 410s and then maybe do a little bit on Friday, right? And they're like, yeah, we got it. And it was the first opportunity. And I was really, you know, as a leader, like some days you're like, I think most of this is sticking, right? You know, I think it's working. And then because you intrinsically can feel it, but there's been nothing that's been demonstrative that says in action, okay, here it is. And when I walked in the office on Friday and everything's humming, right? I expected it to be me and one of the new folks we got we were getting together to go over a lot of this stuff, transfer information and things like that, but to see everybody there and people that are not traditionally, you know, fabricators or building things, that they're in there with, you know, getting their hands dirty, so to speak. To me, that was it said that we were on the right path as a company.
Nice, very nice. Well, my friend, time to get some more stuff done for the day.
There you go.
It's a pleasure as always.
As always, hey, and I'm going to hold down the fort in Ann Arbor now that you're not here.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a great place. You should, to hang out. You know, Vinology should be opening up soon. It's a great place to go have brunch. Yeah, some great food there too.
Is it a good brunch place?
Yeah.
No, now you got me thinking.
Yeah, I think they open at like 11.
All right,
So
I might be there.
You got a couple hours, so you can still hit the gym.
That's what I plan. You know me well, my friend.
All right, my friend. Have a good rest of your week. I'll talk to you soon.
well.
Take care, everyone.
Enjoy, everybody.